Yes, this is post-war London, the mother city of the British Empire, where the mantle of peace has again fallen over a war-wearied people. London, the city of tradition, wherein once dwelt William the Conqueror, Henry VIII, Cromwell, Milton, Chaucer, Shakespeare, and thousands of others whose names have all become traditional throughout the world. London, the hub of British culture, where the historic Thames still flows uninterrupted on its ancient course, under famous bridges, some old, some new, and some blitzed. Yes, there has been a war here, the worst war in the turbulent history of the British Empire, and we will soon see material evidence of it. But the spirit of Britain survives, and the old Union Jack still waves triumphantly over the land. And still stands the old Royal Exchange, originally patterned after the Bourse in Antwerp, and the Bank of England, the financial center of the British Empire, and the famous Marble Arch, which serves as one of the gateways to Hyde Park, where the people of London gather again to praise or condemn the events of the day, or merely enjoy the diversions of a public park. Outstanding among the familiar landmarks is Buckingham Palace, London residence of the royal family. It was originally built by the Duke of Buckingham as a townhouse for himself and later purchased by King George III. The monument in front is a fitting tribute to Queen Victoria, who made the palace her residence during her long and glorious reign. Admiralty Archway at the west side of Trafalgar Square is also part of the National Memorial to Queen Victoria. Here at Malaya House, we see a little evidence of the Blitz that spared Trafalgar Square and its famous landmarks, such as the National Gallery, housing one of the world's finest collections of great painting, and St. Martin's in the Fields Church, always open to the underprivileged, and the Nelson Monument, erected to the memory of England's great naval hero, Horatio Lord Nelson, who won the Battle of Trafalgar and gave his life for his country. Thus far, we have seen very little material evidence of what the recent war has done to London. In fact, comparatively few of its historic landmarks have been destroyed. But we will direct our attention now to some of the damage that was done by bombing. This is the Port of London Authority building. Its massive tower stands upright in the midst of a shattered top story, where all of the offices were destroyed except one. And that one, at the time of our visit, was still doing uninterrupted business at the old stand. An ancient landmark that was severely blitzed is that section of London known as the Temple, or the Law Courts, once the headquarters of the Knights Templar. But since the 14th century, it has been inhabited principally by a community of lawyers or barristers. Among the many historic events that have been associated with this hallowed ground was the presentation of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, in which Shakespeare himself took a leading part with his own players. And this is all that remains of the birthplace of Charles and Mary Lamb, the famous authors and critics who did so much to popularize the plays of William Shakespeare. Verily, there are ghosts in this temple, beyond the reach of bombs, ghosts that will always live in the memory of mankind. Perhaps the most extreme example of wartime destruction in London may be seen in the vicinity of St. Paul's Cathedral, where entire city blocks were completely bombed out. And now we behold the miracle of the London Blitz. St. Paul's Cathedral, standing upright amidst the ruins around it, standing as it has stood for almost 3 centuries. Although there is great tragedy in these ruins, the ultimate consequence will be a brighter and better London, into which more sunshine will enter to dispel the sinister shadows of war. Never again will the decrepit old buildings that once crowded out the majestic Cathedral of St. Paul mar the setting, for it is the plan of the city fathers to build anew with respect for this shrine. A somewhat poetic sidelight on this depressing scene is the colorful wildflowers that grow out of the ashes. It is said that flowers like these have not been seen in London since the Great Fire in 1666. Consequently, they are now referred to as London fireflowers. They too soften the scars of war and symbolize the spirit of the new life that is now filtering into London. This grand old edifice, standing like something resurrected from the dead, is a symbol of the resurrection that is destined to come to all of the buildings of London that were destroyed by war. But we feel that no modern construction will be able to surpass this architectural wonder, which is probably the outstanding landmark of the British Empire. Within its sacred tombs lie buried many of the illustrious dead of Britain, but it is to the living that St. Paul's now offers greatest consolation, hope and faith, and things that are here and greater things that are destined to come. The regal pomp of yesterday has returned to London with all its colorful tradition, and the Lord Mayor on this occasion is host to the first British expeditionary force that distinguished itself in the War of 1914, at which time these men made such an impression on the Kaiser during the Battle of the Marne that he referred to them as contemptible, and they have proudly kept the name ever since. Such is the spirit that is British. And now let us go for a ride down Piccadilly, where life has taken on a post-war feeling, and the whirl of old London is beginning to assert itself again. Here in Piccadilly Circus, the hub of the British Empire, one may find a conglomeration of peoples representing every color, creed, and nationality in the world. During the war, millions of Allied soldiers passed this way, en route to and from the battlefronts of the world. And while in transit, they presented a spectacle that will never be forgotten in the annals of old Piccadilly. And when the sun shines in Piccadilly, a little touch of the spirit of Paris intrudes itself, foreign and unusual. Getting back to the traditional, we are inspired by the significance of this institution, in which the Houses of Parliament meet. It covers 8 acres, has 1,100 rooms, 100 staircases, and 2 miles of passages. Aside from material proportions, however, we are most impressed by the fact that this is the seat of the supreme government of the British Empire, the mother of parliaments and free nations, elected by universal suffrage, the model for the whole world of representative institutions, the last word in democracy. And while we're on the subject of democracy, it is fitting that we should turn our attention now to a solitary monument that stands within the shadow of the Houses of Parliament and also symbolizes Britain's appreciation for the champions of democracy in all countries. Abraham Lincoln, the American rail splitter who brought freedom to 3 million slaves. The great Tower of London, dating back through 9 centuries to the days of William the Conqueror, is another survivor of the war. In conclusion, we rejoice that most of the cherished old landmarks and institutions of London have escaped the horrors of war, for without them, the civilized world would be deprived of a priceless heritage. And it is with this thought that we now conclude our impressions of post-war London.